I'm talking about the entirely legitimate question of whether Donald Trump could be compromised by the Russian government.
The evidence here is that Senator Menendez enriched himself, made decisions not for the public good, but for the private good, meaning his bank account, and that he took bribes, that he took, we saw gold bars, that he took cash, and that he took that money in order to affect investigations, in order to do things like use his position as a public official and give a foreign government, the Egyptian government, sensitive information.
It's more than a legitimate question. It's the natural question that comes to mind every time we learn more about the links between President Trump, his associates, and the Russian government.
The way this case started was wrong. The way it was investigated was wrong.
This goes to the heart of what it doesn't mean to be a public servant. Being a public servant means that you run for office or you're appointed in order to make decisions to benefit your constituents.
We learned that following one of the meetings with Putin, Trump phoned a New York Times reporter to argue that Russia did not interfere in the 2016 election.
The way it was prosecuted was wrong, and the way it was tried was wrong as well.
Once again, carrying the Kremlin's water in direct conflict with the entire U.S. intelligence community.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So,
you know, it's interesting. Robert Mueller was a god to the Democrats, was a god to them until he said there was no collusion. They don't like him so much right now.
Anonymous, nameless, faceless individuals on a website can drive that type of story into the mainstream. But that's what they've done successfully. Now nobody can find them. No one ever met them. No one ever talked to them. But that's where we're at.
What do you think the intelligence community would do if they were motivated?
I don't know, but from what I am told, they are very upset with how he has treated them and talked about them.
End quote. This comes a day after another Menendez supporter, Benedetto Bajica of Elmwood Park, pleaded guilty in Newark federal court to conspiring to make illegal campaign contributions to the senator. And all this happens as Menendez appears to be poised to become chair of the powerful Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
The collusion delusion is over.
And as the ranking member on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, there have to be certifications by the Department of State in conjunction with the Department of Defense that says that Ukraine is meeting its responsibilities and goals as it relates to dealing with its fight against corruption.
Dr. Salomon Melgen's West Palm Beach, Florida office was raided this week. Medicare and Medicaid fraud investigators and FBI agents carried out several boxes of material. The FBI will only say it was conducting, quote, law enforcement activity.
As of last year, more than 46,000 cases were pending before it, many of them among the most complex and challenging cases in the nation.
The prosecution started this morning's arguments by saying again and again to the jury, use your common sense when coming to a decision. Courtroom observers are saying the government is making a compelling case that Senator Menendez, in essence, acted as his friend and co-defendant's personal U.S. senator by accepting gifts and campaign contributions in exchange for helping Dr. Salomon Melgen obtain visas. He intervened in a port dispute and a $9 million Medicare dispute.
But the Miami Herald reports the FBI agents who raided Dr. Melgen's South Florida offices were looking for his financial records and alleged links to underage prostitutes.
I've told you how I feel about the source of this stuff. It's really very, very typical for the source.
And while the Menendez camp stands firm in its denial, last April, the senator himself pulled no punches when I asked him what should happen to those Secret Service agents, the ones who allegedly got involved with prostitutes in Colombia.
If the facts are true, they should all be fired.
Since you're attacking us, can you give us a question? No, Mr. President-elect.
Go ahead.
Mr. President-elect, since you are attacking our news organization, can you give...
The very essence of our democracy, the very essence of the checks and balances for the American people, they're eviscerated. They're gone. Our government has dramatically changed.
It goes to a jury. What do you think?
Well, I think that there's going to be a tough battle that's going to go on here about the definition of what a bribe is, especially after the recent Supreme Court decisions. And the judge did a very good job at instructing the jury. And it's just going to be a simple fact is, was this a quid pro quo, or was this being given as part of a friendship? The government did a very good job putting on its case, and the defense did a good job defending it. It's up to the jury now.
Deadlocked on every single count. This judge went one extra step, very, very rare, by the way, by talking to each juror individually. That almost never happens. And he was obviously satisfied and came to a point that simply said, okay, enough is enough. They are never going to reach a verdict. Keep in mind here, too, they had a different juror as of last week. Then this juror had a prearranged vacation and so had to leave. So they had to start over again this week. So when they come back on day one of this week and say we can't reach a verdict, I don't blame the judge for sending them back and waiting. Day 4, big different story.
Well, now back to the mistrial declared today in the federal bribery case against New Jersey's U.S. Senator Bob Menendez. John Yang is back with that.
Total exoneration, complete vindication.
So my gratitude to all those New Jerseyans and Americans from across the country who believed in me and helped me mount my legal defense against the millions of dollars spent by the overwhelming weight of the federal government.
John, the defense argument was that these men have been friends for 25 years, that yes, Solomon Melgen flew Bob Menendez to the Dominican Republic dozens of times on his private jet, and yes, he paid for a Paris vacation once, and yes, he gave $700,000 to the Democratic Party in 2012, earmarked for Menendez's reelection, but that's not necessarily a bribery scheme.
I've told you how I feel about the source of this stuff. It's really very, very typical for the source.
Key argument from Menendez's defense team was that the prosecution could not match specific gifts to specific actions taken by Menendez, particularly because Menendez and Solomon Melgen were friends for decades. Can you elaborate on that?
When Ukraine, even unwillingly, gets involved, it's not about doing what is right. It is about ultimately taking care of their business, their needs. When a foreign government is interfering in our elections, it's not about you, America. It's about them.
That sensational story about Senator Robert Menendez supposedly patronizing prostitutes in the Dominican Republic seemed to unravel this week. It was days before Menendez was up for re-election when the conservative website The Daily Caller said that 2 women, it would not provide their names, alleged that they'd had sex with the New Jersey senator.
And they were not supposed to be leaking to the press during the early stages of their investigation, which violated my rights to a fair process. I've made my share of mistakes, but my mistakes were never a crime.
Now, I can't prove that the Daily Caller is wrong in saying that its reporter spoke to different prostitutes, but the FBI has found no evidence in this case, and the caller hasn't proven that case. Based on these latest reports, it's clear that someone was out to smear Menendez and to use the media in doing so.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So
now, most news organizations shied away from the unsubstantiated allegations, which Menendez vehemently denied. The Washington Post this week reported on affidavits in which one prostitute said she was paid to lie about Menendez. Here's Post reporter Carol Lenig.
I've been in enough trials to understand that a little bit of what you do is you have a flash over here, so you're not looking what the other hand is doing over here. And that's largely what I heard the president's defense team do. Create flashes over here so you weren't thinking about the essence, the core of the House manager's case, which is rather compelling. I want to hear that any evidence that the president genuinely cared about rooting out corruption. I want to show me the facts.
1 week from Tuesday, voters will head to the polls for New Jersey's midterm primaries, the only statewide race this cycle is for the U.S. Senate. Senator Bob Menendez is running for re-election after his bribery case ended in a mistrial last year. In January, the Justice Department announced plans to retry Menendez, but promptly reversed course just 2 weeks later.
I've learned through this process a lot about our system of justice. It is truly a system of justice you can afford. I understand why so many Americans feel that justice is elusive. But for supporters from across the country who believed in me, who knew who I am and what I stand for, I could never have afforded the millions of dollars this case has cost.
And after 3 years of lies and smears and slander, the Russia hoax is finally dead.
A lot of controversy around President Trump everywhere, as you know, but he's not very popular in New Jersey. It hasn't helped that New Jerseyans are going to pay more in federal taxes as a result of the tax reform law, that he's withholding money for the Gateway Tunnel.
That connects New Jersey to New York, yeah.
That's correct. I think that's going to buoy Democrats like Menendez and many congressional candidates quite a bit.
Thank you, New Jersey! And thank you, Lord, for getting me through everything I've been through. I've also learned about the incredible weight and power of the federal government and how it can crush you if it wants to. It gives me an even greater resolve to make sure that there is a check to that awesome power. Because where do I go to? What office or department of the federal government gives me back the past 2.5 years of my life?
Yes, because I was watching America shift from a country that really worked for working people, a country that was really about opening opportunities, an America that invested in kids like me. I went to a commuter college.
And again, David, it kind of ties into not only the Menendez trial, but the Awan brothers, Fusion GPS, as you were talking about earlier. The media has been colluding to cover up some of these scandals that are really breaking on the Democrat side of things. But
when you have a foreign government, either because they want to or you elicit them, get involved in our elections, guess what? When Putin decides that he wants to get involved in our elections, it's not because he cares about America. He cares about his business and Russia.
just to tie in a little bit to what Rachel was saying, I mean, here you have somebody that is being brought up on charges of bribery and corruption, might miss these votes. Here's the kicker, though, David. For him to actually be removed, if he chooses not to step down, if he's convicted and doesn't step down, it would take 67 senators to vote to remove him from office. And so then that becomes the question, will there be Democrats who will allow a felon, if he's convicted, to stay in office?
That costs $50 a semester, an opportunity that's not out there for kids today. And what I've watched over time and what I talk about in this book is how this country works better and better for the corporate interests, for the executives, for the billionaires who have the money to influence Washington, to make it work for them. And as a result, we're getting to be a country that works better and better for fewer and fewer and kicks dirt in everybody else's face. I'm in this to fight back.
Give us a chance.
Your organization
You are
is
attacking
terrible.
our news organization.
Your organization
Can you give
is
us a
terrible.
chance
Let's
to
go.
ask a question, sir?
Go ahead.
Sir, can
Quiet.
you state,
Quiet.
Mr. President?
What's the most surprising thing that you've learned about Senator Menendez's activities?
I think that his involvement in something called the U.S. Spain Council, which is an organization that was started by then Vice President Gore in 1996. It's composed of multinational corporations, lobbying outfits like Greenberg Traurig.
Go ahead.
Can you state categorically,
She's asking a question. Don't
Mr.
be rude.
President-elect, can you give us a question?
Don't be
You're
rude.
attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
Can you give us
And he is the chairman, honorary chairman, all over the website. And a former staffer of his, who is Pedro Pablo Permoy, who worked at Greenberg Traurig as a lobbyist, is the president of this association.
Impeachment has only personified what this administration has done. If they can drive the ability to have no witnesses for Congress to do oversight, no documents for Congress to do oversight, added to the fact that they believe that this administration believes it can go to war without the approval of Congress, and then take one of Congress's main roles, which is to provide money, and decide that they're going to transfer the money.
I think that what's happened is we've been so overwhelmed by the corruption in politics in general that we've forgotten that that's really not the question, Mike. The issue is the Senate Ethics Committee, which is looking at this, is looking and trying to enforce a standard which is the appearance of a conflict of interest.
So it may not be illegalities, but the Senate has its own rule of ethics.
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
Can you state categorically that nobody... No, Mr. President-elect, that's not appropriate.
Today is a victory of hope over hate, for facts over fiction, for inclusion over division, for hard work over ripping people off.
We do have breaking news, an indictment, a federal indictment with major implications in Washington and abroad. New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez and his wife have been indicted on corruption-related charges. Menendez is the powerful chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He and his wife are accused of accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes in exchange for the Democratic senator's influence. What's more, this is the second time in the past 10 years that Menendez has faced charges like this. We are getting new details.
Here's my plan to dismantle the deep state and reclaim our democracy from Washington corruption once and for all. And corruption it is.
And new pictures from this indictment, including gold bars. CNN's Kara Scannell outside the federal courthouse in New York following this all. Kara, what are you learning?
New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez is resisting calls for his resignation after being charged with several corruption-related offenses by the Justice Department. Menendez and his wife are accused of accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes in exchange for the senator's influence.
What do you think the intelligence community would do if they were motivated?
I don't know, but from what I am told, they are very upset with how he has treated them and talked about them.
This is the second time in the last decade Menendez is facing corruption charges.
And prosecutors say the bribes included gold bars, cash, home mortgage payments, and a luxury vehicle. Menendez denied the accusations and responded to calls for his resignation, saying he is, quote, not going anywhere. CNN's Kara Scannell has the latest.
For starters, you can call him Rob, lest you mistake him for Bob, his dad. That's Bob on the right. He's the U.S. Senator, former mayor of Union City, and in Hudson County especially, big time, as they used to say. But the fact that the senator's son has been basically handed a seat in Congress has little to do with that, says the current congressman, Rob Menendez, would succeed.
Why should we penalize him for having a name like Menendez? I don't know anyone out there that can match his, what he brings to the district.
Rob, huh? You don't think anyone's going to notice?
Notice what?
The name, Rob Menendez, Robert Menendez.
Well, it's the name I was given by both my mother and my father. I'm listening. I'm excited to be on the show today.
I will say that there has been criticism of your race. Some people have said that this seat was all but handed to you because of who your father is, that this is some of the worst of New Jersey politics, some of the criticism that we've heard. What do you say to that?
Sure. So, we were the first in this race to declare our candidacy, and we've been working it hard every single day. We started today at about 7 a.m. And got here after polls closed at 8 o'clock. That's been the last several weeks on this campaign, and that's the way we've ran this campaign since day one.
Rob Menendez is an attorney with a big-time law firm, just recently appointed by the governor. He's the one on the left, next to Rob's father, to the powerful Port Authority Board of Commissioners, and now endorsed by Governor Murphy and just about every other elected official in Hudson. And in Hudson, where it's like 9-1 Democrats, the guy the party bosses like for the seat is the guy who gets the seat.
So you know what people are saying, right? Senator's son, insider, endorsed by the governor just days after announcing. They're saying that the path
has to this seat has been cleared for you. Are people wrong?
For somebody to come outside of the system, you're gonna now run up against the governor, the senators, every local machine that's going to line up. So you're at a tremendous organizational, financial, legitimacy standpoint disadvantage, because now this heir apparent has inherited the line, which means that he walks into election day with 35% of the vote. You know, if you and I were to run a mile, but I say I can only start running once you've run 2/3 of the way, you might not find that to be a fair race.
Listen, ultimately, like I said earlier, it's about the primary in June. There's other announced candidates for the primary. I know how I feel, David. This is a moment to be actively engaged, to raise your hand and say, what can I do to benefit the people who call this district home? So those are the conversations I'm having, continuing to engage in the community.
Hector Oseguera has been there. He tried unsuccessfully to unseat Ceres in the Democratic primary in 2020. The latest, best example of the power party officials have to control and some suggest subvert democracy.
Look, I don't know Robbie Menendez from a hole in the wall, but if we look at that district, it's like it would be an awesome place to recruit a fantastic candidate, or to have a real primary where you have you expose the array of different points of view within the Democratic Party, all of which are super relevant right now. So it's a shame. It's actually just a real shame.
To have a successful outcome in June.
But on the line itself, the concept of the party determining ballot positioning, I'm sure you know there's a court case making its way through the courts right now. Do you have an opinion on that system?
It's going to continue to work its way through the court system. It's actually being handled by classmates of mine from Rutgers Law, where I graduated in 2011. But listen, I'm focused on June. I'm focused on giving people a reason to vote for me. I'm excited about that opportunity. I think this is just a unique moment in our country's history.
Patricia Campos Medina just recently wrote an op-ed about the need for more women in politics. She says the party apparatus often works against the interest of voters, particularly in places like Hudson, where a seat in Congress can be a lifetime gig.
Robert Menendez Jr. could be a good congressman, but it is for him to be able to prove it to voters. It is for voters to be able to evaluate his skills and to make an argument to the voters that he is the best person for the job. A primary election is able to do that for candidates.
Menendez was mentioned for a few minutes as a potential candidate to challenge Steve Fulop for mayor in Jersey City last year, but that effort sputtered. There was a sense among some community members he talked to that he was maybe looking for an easier campaign to run.
The work we do is credible, and so we just don't want to just tag along, someone who just came up on the scene. We want to see somebody just write and challenge and kind of push back. We want fighters.
Menendez officially announced his candidacy last week, and we haven't heard back from him yet. His reps say he was too busy for interviews this week. It'll be up to voters, technically, to determine whether they want the senator's son to be their favorite son. I'm David Cruz, NJ Spotlight News.
New Jersey has not sent a Republican to the Senate since 1972, but it might this year, despite the unpopularity of President Bush and the war in Iraq. In towns across New Jersey, like here in Summit, voters have been wrestling with a close race between a candidate who was an early opponent of the Iraq War and one whose name is practically state political royalty. Sensing their only chance to take a Senate seat away from the Democrats, national Republicans are channeling money into the campaign of Tom Kean Jr., the namesake of the revered former governor who chaired the 9/11 Commission. Kean has hammered relentlessly on the theme of corruption, insisting Robert Menendez, appointed last year by Governor John Corzine to fill Corzine's unexpired Senate term, is under an ethical cloud.
It's you, the taxpayers, who are being asked to pay more at every level of government
because these deals are going on. We need to root out corruption at every level of government. It's one of the reasons I'm running for the United States Senate.
Well, no, I won't admit that it's dirty, nasty New Jersey politics. I will admit that it's dirty, nasty Tom Kean Jr. politics.
Menendez, who as congressman voted against the war in Iraq 4 years ago, has taken every opportunity to tie Kean to the president and the war.
Even though the events of the last 2 years have largely discredited George Bush's position on Iraq, Tom Kean Jr. still stands with him.
I've clearly said that there have been horrendous mistakes made by this administration in the war in Iraq, and I've called for Secretary Rumsfeld's resignation.
Pre-election polls in the state give Menendez a slight lead, but the race is one of a handful of Senate contests labeled too close to call.
Well, I'm going to vote for Mr. Kean. How come? Because of all the publicity that Menendez has gotten. Poor publicity.
The corruption stuff?
Yes.
The investigation stuff?
Yeah, that's really turned me off from him.
I think I'm going to vote Democratic.
And that's because?
I actually heard Menendez speaking on the radio yesterday, and I didn't disagree with anything that he said.
And then there's the wild card, gay marriage. The New Jersey Supreme Court ruled recently that the state discriminates against same-sex couples by not allowing them to marry. It's unclear whether the issue could energize dispirited social conservatives who usually vote Republican. Warren Levinson, The Associated Press, Summit, New Jersey.